The year was 1861. The United States was coming apart. The issue, slavery. In the South, life and economy depended on enslaved labor. Cotton was king. Many Southerners saw slavery as their right. In the North, industry was rising, cities were growing, and more voices called slavery a moral stain. Abolitionists demanded an end to human bondage, believing all men are created equal. As the country expanded west, every new territory reignited the question, free or slave. Compromises failed. Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860 was the final straw for the South. South Carolina seceded, others followed, forming the Confederate States of America. In April 1861, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The war had begun. No one imagined the years of bloodshed ahead. The seeds of conflict had grown into a war that would define a nation. The nation's fate hung in the balance. The Civil War had begun. When war came, Americans on both sides rushed to enlist. Parades filled the streets, flags waved from every window. Young men like Elisha Hunt Rhodes felt a sense of glory, ready to die for their country. In the South, men saw themselves as defenders of home and land. Sullivan Ballou wrote to his wife, torn between love for family and duty to country. The romance of war faded quickly. Endless drilling, long marches, and the boredom of camp life set in. Soldiers waited for orders, for battle, for letters from home. Sam Watkins described hardtack biscuits that could break your teeth and disease that killed more than bullets. Dysentery, typhoid, pneumonia, constant enemies in camp. Families left behind struggled too. Wives ran farms and businesses. Mothers scanned newspapers for news of their sons. Every letter from the front was a lifeline. A woman in Georgia wrote of loneliness and the fear of bad news. The war was fought not just on battlefields, but in every American home. The burden of war was shared by soldiers and families alike. Hope and anxiety became daily companions. The nation was mobilized, but the cost was only beginning to be understood. The reality of war was far from the glory many had imagined. The struggle would test the resolve of an entire people. The first major battle at Bull Run shattered illusions of a quick, glorious war. Spectators expecting a spectacle witnessed chaos and slaughter as the Union Army fled in panic. The reality of industrial warfare had arrived. Life on the front lines was terror and tedium, deafening battles, endless marches, and nights on hard ground. A Confederate soldier described the fear before a charge. The Battle of Antietam became the bloodiest day in American history. 23,000 casualties in 12 hours. Matthew Brady's photographs brought the brutal reality of war into American homes. Yet there was courage. Soldiers risked their lives for comrades, standing their ground against impossible odds. Sometimes enemies called truces, trading coffee for tobacco, talking about home. They were enemies, but also Americans, sharing a common humanity. In those moments, the tragedy of the war was clear. The front lines revealed both the horror and the humanity of war. The cost was measured not just in lives lost, but in innocence destroyed. The Civil War was forging a new, harsher reality. The nation would never be the same. The war transformed life on the home front. In the North, factories boomed, fortunes were made, but inflation and hardship hit working families. Women took on new roles, working in factories, nursing, running farms. Mary Livermore and thousands of volunteers provided vital aid to soldiers. In the South, the Union blockade brought shortages and hunger. People made coffee from acorns, clothes from curtains. Salt was worth its weight in gold. Bread riots broke out. Confederate money became worthless. The dream of a Southern nation was crumbling. For enslaved African Americans, the war was hope. Thousands fled plantations, seeking refuge with Union armies, working as laborers, cooks, and spies. Robert Smalls famously commandeered a Confederate ship to freedom. The war divided the home front too. In the North, Copperheads opposed the war. Draft riots in New York turned violent and racist. In the South, poor farmers resented fighting a rich man's war. Unity was fracturing under the strain. The war's suffering was everywhere, on the battlefield, in the cities, and in every home. The struggle for freedom and survival touched all Americans. The nation was being remade by sacrifice and loss. The summer of 1863 marked a turning point. Grant's victory at Vicksburg split the Confederacy. Lee's invasion of Pennsylvania led to Gettysburg. For 3 days, the largest battle in North America raged. Pickett's charge ended in disaster for the Confederates. Lee's army never recovered. Lincoln came to dedicate the Gettysburg Cemetery. In just 2 minutes, his Gettysburg address redefined the war's purpose, a new birth of freedom. The war was now about liberty and equality, not just union. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation declared enslaved people in rebellious states free. The war became a revolution, an army of liberation. Nearly 200,000 African American soldiers would fight for the Union. They proved their courage at battles like Fort Wagner. Gettysburg and emancipation gave the war new meaning. The fight was now for the soul of the nation. The promise of freedom was at stake. The sacrifices at Gettysburg would echo through history. The war's outcome would shape the future of America. The struggle for equality had begun in earnest. The nation was being reborn. The final year was grim and relentless. Grant's strategy: keep pressing Lee, no matter the cost. Battles like the Wilderness and Cold Harbor brought horrific casualties. Sherman's march through Georgia and the Carolinas destroyed the South's will to fight. Cities burned, railroads torn up, food seized, total war. By spring 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Richmond fell. Lee's starving army was surrounded. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse, Lee surrendered to Grant. Grant's terms were generous. Confederates could keep their horses and return home. The war was over. Jubilation in the North, quiet grief in the South. A Confederate soldier wrote, "The end has come." More than 620,000 soldiers had died. The land was scarred, the nation devastated. The task of rebuilding would be as hard as the war itself. The world the South had fought for was gone forever. The cost of the conflict was almost unimaginable. The war's legacy would shape generations to come. The Union was preserved, but at a terrible price. The nation faced a new and uncertain future. The Civil War ended slavery. The 13th Amendment abolished it forever. 4 million people were freed. Hope soared. The 14th and 15th Amendments promised citizenship and voting rights. Reconstruction aimed to rebuild the South and create equality. But the scars ran deep, cities in ruins, bitterness lingering. Many white Southerners resisted change. Violence and terror followed. The dream of interracial democracy faced fierce opposition. Federal commitment waned. By 1877, Reconstruction ended. Jim Crow laws replaced old oppression. The promise of equality was betrayed. The work of the war was left unfinished. Questions of race, freedom, and the meaning of America remained. The struggle for civil rights would continue for generations. The Civil War is America's great tragedy, and its crucible. The stories of those who lived and died remind us, history is human. The work of creating a more perfect union is never finished. It falls to every generation.